right. Those of you joining us on YouTube, hello, hello, hello. For those of you joining us on TikTok, hello to you as well. And pretty soon we should be having it on the old-fashioned Facebook, Instagram. There's Twitter. It's all out there. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all Facebook. It's all Double Dog Addiction all the time. So give me a couple seconds and then we'll get started on the old episode of Rooski. I need to refill my agua. Alright, come on. Come on. Come on. Alright. Smudger's being rude, so he's gonna come sit over here with us and do the show with us today. Alright. Usually you have him on the kitty cam on YouTube, but he doesn't want to stay in his spot. He wants to have more love for us. Alright, my friends, it's time to get going then. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Chicago. Yes, it's chilly outside, but today we're gonna start with the truth. Not the cartoon version of the truth. My friends on YouTube over there, hope you're having a good old-fashioned morning in Chicago on YouTube. And they're on TikTok. You got anything good to say? What up there, Melvin Terrell 83853? Is that what it says? I don't know. I'm losing my sight, right? We got to work on this here, folks. But, you know, we're talking about, we're going to talk about the truth. The truth about drugs. What we were taught, what we were told in health class and all that good stuff wasn't necessarily the best things to be telling people to be like, oh, drugs are bad, and then just go with that and not explain why, right? But we're not going with the cartoon version of drugs, of course, not the scare tactic PSA, right, with the fried egg, you know, and the dramatic music. This is your brain. This in the pan. This is your brain on drugs. What up there, Russ? Not the one-page worksheet, of course. It says drugs are bad at the top, listing all the things and like why they're bad, why they're bad, why they're bad, why they're bad. I mean, like, yep, there you go. That's it. What up there, Jason Miller 986? My name's Nick. This is Double Dog Addiction. We're talking about drugs, the truth about drugs, and what we think and what we're taught about drugs in health class, right? What up there, Ace HGH? What up there, Justin Carroll? You know, the whole drugs are bad without explaining why, right? Today we're gonna break down and open that gap between what we were taught, right, and then actually what we have lived, because a lot of these times they don't mix up, right? Because when a generation grows up knowing that adults lied to them, because if adults say, hey, drugs are bad, and then you realize, and then you're like, you use them and you're like, oh, wait a minute, they're not all bad, so why, if they lied to me about this, what else are they lying to me about, right? Even if the adults meant well. And that's the thing, folks, is that as a parent, you're just trying to do the best you can as a parent, and at the time, medical doctors say one thing, and so you go with, like, the professional advice, right? But a lot of times we inherit confusion, a lot of times we inherit shame, we inherit mistrust, and we inherit basically a complete misunderstanding of our own bodies, right? Or our own bodies in relation to the world, right? What up there, Bridget Red? What up there, Jim Saz? What up there, Flaming Host, Funder? Alika06, all that good stuff, Jeffrey Edwards. We inherit these things, right? So in this first segment, we're going to look at the physical and emotional realities of drug use, right? And the early misinformation that sets us up, right? It sets us up, a lot of us sets us up for failure, a lot of us sets us up to give us distorted views and give us distortion, which became basically the first wound that many of us carried into addiction, right? We've carried into addiction. A lot of us start early, and if we started early, then we didn't get to learn those life skills that you're supposed to learn. Well, everyone else is learning these coping mechanisms for life. We were numbing and evading and escaping and doing all that. Sorry, buddy. And doing all that good stuff. He's like, hey, you're being too wild. So we're going to get into this, my friends, with the first basic text. We learned that we had to change our old ways or thinking, or we would not stay clean. So if we want to stay clean, folks, if you want to get clean and sober and you want to stay that way, you have to change the way that we think, right? Or we definitely will not stay sober. And right now, we don't talk about sobriety as in just like some pure abstinent thing that we don't use drugs and then you're sober, right? It's a whole collection of things that you have to add it all together. What up there, Nomad? What up there, Edge 72, Carol, Christian Vink, Antonio Mensa, Linebacker 55, Jameson Tanges. What you doing, buddy? He's being silly. Now, of course, this line in the NAA text comes from a section about surrender, about clarity, and breaking these mental loops that keep us sick long before drugs ever touch our own bodies, of course. And now he's going back to his little bed. Wonderful. Smudge, what do you want to go back to your bed? There you go. There you go. Sit down. Now you can be a good little dude and hang out in your bed. Stop being a little rude, little biscuit. Go on, lay down. There, you can snuggy buggy there. Oh man, he's being a goofball. What up, Daniel Lanas 94, Ken Watts? Anyway, we're gonna get back into this, folks. Even though the cat doesn't want to hang out and do whatever he wants to do, we're gonna do what we need to do because we need to talk about addiction, right? If we keep thinking the way that we've always thought, right, we keep ending up where we always keep ending up. And we'll say it one more time. If we keep thinking the way we keep thinking or thought, right, we're going to keep ending up in the places that we keep ending up, right? And we need to break mental loops. It's not easy. It's not easy, folks. What up there, Wanda Williams? It's not easy to break loops, especially mental ones that we've ingrained deep neurological ruts, right? That are they're just like stuck there, man. You're just like, man, I got to keep doing this over and over and over again, and it's became this habit, this bad habit that really is not very good for you at all. But this is not just about staying clean. What we were saying earlier, you can't just do one thing. We talk mind, body, spirit, of course, but it's about unlearning the bullshit that we were fed, stuffed with, and said, let me have some more for basically however long we've been living, right? And I'm not saying that our parents are doing this as like an attack on our parents. It's everything. It's society around us. It's school systems. It's teachers. It's church. Whatever religion you go to a lot of times. Parents raise their children in a religion, and stuff gets. You have kids that everybody's telling them what to do, and you're just soaking in so much information, and a lot of times we think that maybe we're hiding what we're doing, or we're maybe we're one step ahead of the kids, or we think that they're not seeing what we're doing. My friends, kids, our kids, other people's kids, children in the world see us and see everything we do, and they soak it on up, and then they imitate us, and because they I mean, that's just what they do. And we go on through our lives not realizing that each and every one of us is a mentor. Each and every one of us is a role model. Each and every one of us is a leader, okay? And it doesn't mean that we're all like, carrying flags and doing speeches and running for Congress and shit like that, right? That's not what I mean by being a leader in that sense. I'm saying that you can be somebody that even just one person can look up to and you can make better. Then that is the purpose of, well, this show, of course. This show is the purpose is to, hey, what up there, Mike Gilbert? Sorry, I missed someone else's. What was that? Freddie, yes, can't miss that one. What up there, Frank Hale 100? Hope you guys are having a great, good old-fashioned Chicago morning. And we need to realize that we've been fed this malarkey by whatever you want to say we've been fed it by. But we've definitely been fed a whole bunch of it. Because if your entire understanding of drugs is built on fear-based messaging that doesn't match reality, your brain learns quickly, of course, that adults cannot be trusted on the topic of drugs. So, right? So, user 8755-339-2656, and then Cindy hanging down there. And before we can talk about cocaine, fentanyl, ecstasy, heroin, trauma, feelings, chemistry, or harm, well, we must break down the broken framework we were handed. And this segment is the reset. And our first three terms we're going to get into today, because we always get into some free key terms. Neuroadaptation. The brain's physical adjustment to repeated drug exposure, changing how we feel, how we think, how we function. We know now that long-term opioid use, it literally changes your brain chemistry, and it changes the way that you perceive happiness and sadness, pain and unpain, pleasure, unpain, pleasure. What up there, Donnie Sprawling, Ronnie Delaface, time to fix you. Yeah, that's a fun one. Gotta love that. Changing how we feel, think, and function, because these things, they change us, and then we are forever changed. And that's my whole hope, is that we can prevent the younger generation, people, or young generation, the generation right after mine, or anybody younger than us, basically, right, to hopefully not use drugs at least until their brains are done developing, which is what, like 25 or some shit like that, 26. I don't really know the science about it. There's people out there, man, this is a science show. But we know that 18, that's a stupid fucking idea to make it legal for like tobacco, and 21 for marijuana. It's stupid, right? And if it's about stopping these things, they're like, oh, wait a minute, I thought you're for the legalization of all drugs. Yes, but with a certain age, right? If we really want to be completely realistic about it, which will never happen, obviously, probably not in our lifetime, not until some of these people that keep getting all this money, the pharmaceutical companies keep getting money for these drugs, and there's just too much money to be made. And until we fix the problem of our feelings problem in this country, where we fix the whole thing, where our focus isn't just only needing money, right, then we can maybe start working on focusing on other things that are more important, to the human condition, right? So anyway, let's move forward on this one. Emotional conditioning. When our brains learn to tie relief, escape, or confidence to a substance. Now, I know we all have that out there that, that gives us a little bit of extra courage, a liquid courage. I've heard that term before, right? What up there, Mountain Michael? Hope you're having a good old-fashioned Chicago morning. And how about this one? Physiological load. And that's the cumulative stress that drugs place on our heart, our liver, hormones, and neurological systems, because it's a combination of physical and psychological, and it also has to do with all the different parts, all the different systems in your body, and these drugs, they affect all of it. Like, you're putting a machine that works the way it does, and you're putting different things into it, and like different like if it was a car, you're putting like different types of power into it, right? Or different extra little gizmos and gadgets, right? So all three, of course, they begin forming the very first time that a person uses, long before dependence or tolerance or any of the like develops. So let me take you back, my friends, to health class for a moment. That's like one of those things, like when you go back in time in a movie where they're like, shimmer, shimmer on the outside of the page. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Sit us down and told us, here we go, cocaine would make us think there were bugs trying to crawl out from under our skin. Ah! You've seen the videos, folks. If you're around my age or older, then you've seen the ridiculous health class videos. I don't know if they still show them, but it's ridiculous. They told us every hit of weed, any part of the cannabis plant, they were saying, would fry our brain like an egg. Come on, man. Brother Brad, you know what I'm talking about. They told us ecstasy would leave holes in our brains the size of quarters. Literally. They'd be like, yeah, if you take a hit of ecstasy, it's going to dissolve the inside of your brain. And they told us this shit. Mark James, you know what I'm talking about. If you're around my age or older, they made addiction sound like instant damnation, right? Like one bad choice and you're gone forever. So the first time someone actually tries something and it feels good and the catastrophic symptoms and catastrophic something or others don't happen, right? The brain says, oh, wait a minute, I'm safe. And then it says if they lied about this, well, what else have they lied about? And that, my friend, is the emotional conditioning we were talking about. And that's exactly where it starts. When I tried cocaine for the first time, nothing in me felt like scratching my skin, of course, or screaming into the night. No. I felt a rush of energy, of course. I didn't know that my body could create, indeed. And because my health class had prepared me for a panic attack, right, instead of euphoria, the moment did not scare me, it intrigued me. It made me think, interesting, if this does this to my body, then I wonder what this does to my body. What up there, James? Call him out. What up there, Mitchell? Hope you're having a pleasant Chicago morning. And now, of course, we've set up this perfect trap. You've shown a kid that, you know, where adults exaggerate danger, right? And then we've paired the house, paired this up with paired the drug with our positive emotional response that we were talking about earlier. So now we have a house that is starting to be built, like a house of trust that is being built around is being built on a foundation of mistrust, right? So now about drugs, just think about this. We've already started our drug education journey on a bad foot, right? So the farther we go, just try to think, how would it affect addicts a certain way, or how would it affect people who are prone to addiction, right? It could set them off even in a worse direction. What up there, Isaiah? Hope you're having a good old-fashioned Chicago morning. And this combination, misinformation plus relief plus intrigue, is the first fracture in the society, of course, the first fracture that stays with us, right, and our relationships around us. It explains why nearly 1 in 4 adults who misuse drugs report their earliest exposure was shaped by curiosity and disbelief, not rebellion or desperation like we are so often told what leads to a drug-addicted full life. What up there, Dean McClurg? What up there, Judge 1616? What nobody teaches us, of course, is the truth is a little more complex. The truth is a little more in-depth, and the truth is a little more gray than black and white. And when nobody teaches you exactly what drugs do to our brain, because they don't teach us that, the neuroadaptation, the dopamine flooding, the hormone disruption, the dissociation, then the truth ends up teaching us the hard way. And you know that the whole point of Devil Dog Addiction, one of them, that is to hopefully make it so that people can learn from our mistakes and not have to make them and learn the hard way and kind of skip forward in the human evolution process, right? So if everyone doesn't have to learn their own problems, you can just learn from someone else's mistakes, man, what a wonderful world it would be. Then the truth, in this sense, well, it definitely doesn't set us free. And here's the second crack in this foundation. Health class told us drugs were an action problem, right? Not a feelings problem. And this is the very thing, if one thing we can get today before you leave, is that the drug problem is not an action problem. It is not just say no problem. It is not a just quit problem. It's not a just lock them up and throw away the key and get rid of their access to the problem. No, it's a feelings problem. It's a deep down problem. It's a personal problem. It's a personal balance problem. Yeah. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, there's lots of episodes we've done before that explain what we're talking about. But let's get back on track, my friends. They never explained the loneliness. They didn't explain the overwhelm. They didn't explain the emotional neglect. And look, these are things that we may say, oh, I don't think a 6th grader, 7th grade, 8th grade could understand this concept. My friends, kids can understand much more than we give them credit for. In fact, the fact that we keep saying, oh, they can't do this and can't do that is probably dumbing down our population in general. Indeed, Judge 1616, that's exactly when it starts. And the fear in our chest, yes, that we don't have words for at the time. But it's because we aren't given the words, like I was just saying a second ago, because we keep not thinking that people can understand things. And they can. But you just have to know how to explain it to them. Because not everybody learns the same way. And not everybody can understand something when one person says it. Maybe they'll understand a little better if someone else says it. Now, of course, they never connected the whole trauma to the risk of drug addiction, right? They don't talk about that in health class. You know, they never taught us that children exposed to chronic stress are nearly 4 times more likely to experiment with substances before age 15. I'll say that one again for you, folks. Children exposed to chronic stress are nearly 4 times more likely to experience with substances before the age of 15. And think about how much damage that kind of drug use can do on your brains. People are going to look for a way to escape their problems, a way to numb, a way to cope. And if we don't give them proper ways to do it, there's plenty of people out there or places out there or things out there that will do it for us. Now look, if some kid is experimenting with drugs at that age because of chronic stress, because of overwhelmness, right? They're not doing it because they're bad kids. They're not doing it because they need to be punished. They're not doing it because they need to be, thrown in juvie or made even more stressed out by, running them through the legal system again, right? They're only trying to regulate their bodies the way that they have been shown, the way that they've been modeled to, the way that we have been showing them how to deal with emotions. We tell them, hey, if someone disagrees with you, yell at them. And if someone disagrees with you even more, just yell louder, right? And if you can yell louder, and if you can make the other person shut up, then you're right. And that's what we've been teaching people about conflict resolution. So now let's flash forward to drug-induced conflict resolution. Alcohol. After a long day of work, what do we say? Let's get a drink. I need to relax with a nice glass of booze. So now kids grow up learning that if they want to relax, well, let's get some alcohol. And then it goes on from there, my friends. So you say that people used to say, oh, marijuana is a gateway drug. Friends, in my experience, marijuana, if anything, is a gateway off of hard drugs. And alcohol is the gateway drug, okay? But people don't like to call alcohol a drug because then all the alcoholics out there would have to say that they're drug addicts. And imagine having the old motherfuckers at a VFW hall that drink that just go there and drink all fucking day and all night. Try to get them to admit that they're drug addicts. They would know because they look down on drug addicts, right? Drug addicts are dirty. Drug addicts stink. Drug addicts are they'll steal from their sick mom, right? That shit right there. Anyway, the Shamari, how's it going? But look, 70% of teens report that the information that they received or given on drugs was incomplete or obviously exaggerated, right? Which means the education children are getting, right, is not just insufficient, it's actively harming. Because, of course, when the warnings don't match reality, curiosity is going to fill the gaps. When curiosity meets opportunity, experimentation follows. And when experimentation meets emotional relief, the brain starts keeping score, my friends. And we didn't start drugs because we were stupid. We started because nobody taught us the language of our own pain. And if you can't explain yourself, you can't explain your pain, then you can't name your pain, which means we can't fix it. It's one of the basic tenets of addiction recovery, is you have to name your trauma. You have to name what the fuck you're going through. You have to name the issue. So when we became adults who still didn't know how to feel, because we didn't know how to name our pain, well, drugs, especially fast-acting ones like cocaine, fentanyl, meth, MDMA, well, they definitely gave us a shortcut to emotional relief, right? A shortcut that eventually charged interest, and we're still paying it back, right? So what did we learn in this first segment? Well, that misinformation is not harmless, right? The scare tactics do not save lives. Honesty does, right? And that when you tell a kid that a drug is going to kill them, right, and then it doesn't, you don't prevent addiction. You invite it. You hand them a contradiction they don't have the tools to process. So now as adults, we carry these contradictions into our recovery, still trying to untangle what's real, what's exaggerated, what's fear, what's fact. Because if you want to understand the truth about drugs, what they actually do to our bodies, our hearts, our hormones, our nervous system, means we can finally make informed choices. It means we can stop parenting our inner child with lies and start parenting them with a little bit of clarity. Because there's another layer to this story, my friends. What up there, Shasta Jenkins? There's a deep down dive layer to this tale. It's a bigger, uglier hypocrisy that we need to shine a light on. So, if health class failed us by lying, the medical system failed us by telling the truth too late, and that's where we're heading next, my friends. The hypocrisy of legal versus illegal drugs. Next, on Devil Dog Addiction. But I need some more water first. All right, here we go. Ah! It's a fly! What the hell? Ah. All right. Segment 2, friends. We only got 3 segments today, so we're 1/3 the way done. The hypocrisy of legal versus illegal drugs. Look, now that we've cracked open the misinformation that we grew up on, right? We got to talk about the hypocrisy that's shaped our adult relationship with drugs. Because while schools were scaring us with horror stories about cocaine and crack, doctors were handing out prescriptions for opioids like they were candy or going out of style, right? Like Tic Tacs, my friends, while the government told us meth would destroy our lives. Teenagers and children were being prescribed amphetamines under the name Adderall, Ritalin, or Vyvanse, right? And while the media demonized heroin users as junkies, pharmaceutical companies made billions pushing nearly identical substances across every pharmacy in the country. What up there, Kristenia? What up there, Paula Sue? Lucy Bedoya? My name is Jeff, Jimmy Goss. Hope you're having a great Chicago morning. And we're going to get into an AA reading. For this segment, we're going to use the AA Big Book, right? We are people who normally would not mix. Now this comes from chapter 2, right? Describing how addiction cuts across race. It cuts across class, age, it cuts across education. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. It doesn't matter how many zeros are on the end of your paycheck. Hey, what up there, Kristenia? I hope I said your name, I hope you pronounced your name correctly. I like the spelling of it. It's fun. Anyway, addiction touches every kind of human being because the problem is much bigger than us, right? You'll notice that the opioid crisis hit rich suburbs and poor neighborhoods alike. Cocaine travels through boardrooms and basements, right? Adderall dependency shows up in straight A kids and stressed out professionals. Addiction isn't about moral failure. It's about chemistry. It's about access. It's about emotional voids and a system that profits off people staying unwell. When we look at legal and illegal drugs, we see the illusion of difference, right? We see how society punishes one group for what another group is praised for. And we see how confusion around acceptable substances have made millions and millions, if not billions, off of the vulnerable. Time for some keyword phrases, right? Cross tolerance. When using one drug, increases tolerance to another in the same class. So if you're using heroin and Vicodin, it's still going to raise your opioid dependence or tolerance, but we still bounced back and forth off of those medications when the one medication, so for me personally, I'm not going to talk about other people, right? So for me personally, I was prescribed the oxycodone and the extended release Dilaudid, and then when that tolerance went up, they were like, okay, well, let's stop using that for a little bit and let's use the Norcos and what was the other one? I don't know. There's been so many over the years that it was just one. Either way, it doesn't matter what the drug is, but the point of the story is that they just bounce you back and forth, right? But your dependence and tolerance keeps going up, so they got you, right? So here we go. Standardized potency. The regulated, measured strength of prescription medications versus the unpredictable potency of street drugs. Oh, wait, what was that? Close, thank you. It is Kristenia. Okay, there. Well then, Kristenia, I appreciate the comments, and I appreciate you chiming in on this chilly Chicago morning. Standardized potency. We already did that one, friends. Chemical congruence. Yeah, this one, you heard about this, like, when two substances have nearly identical mechanisms in the brain, despite being labeled differently, right? Heroin versus oxycodone. Friends, they've changed the name, but it's basically the same thing. They're prescribing heroin, okay? So stop getting it mixed up, okay? Maybe it's not prescribed as much as it was, but it's still prescribed a whole fucking bunch. And it's still considered perfectly okay. And we have a whole generation of people who are prescribed that shit, a ton of it. And then when the world was like, hey, wait a minute, there's an issue, the medical people and the legal people were like, oh, we better do something. So they fucking cut everybody off. And we're like, yeah, we don't do that shit anymore. We don't prescribe. We're an opioid-free pain clinic. And we're like, huh? And you're just like, you just go in withdrawal. And at that point, you got sick some from the medications, but it's not like you fucking knew where to go to get help for it, right? So you have all these people that are like, so what do I do now? But the street dealers were all more kindly to be like, hey, look, the first one's free and this will stop making you feel sick, and it's way cheaper than trying to buy Vicodin pills or oxycodone pills. My God! And at the time, they were selling that shit for like a dollar a milligram for some of these pills, and you're like, you can't afford to be a drug addict, right? But that's why when you're in that withdrawal, that's why opioid addiction is so dangerous, and why people say, oh, why a dope fiend is the most dangerous, right? Especially when you're withdrawal, because you will do anything to get rid of that sickness, and you know the only thing that'll get rid of it is another hit, which is why methadone and Suboxone are addiction lifesavers. And if people are out there and you cannot get off of, if you just can't get clean off of fentanyl, heroin, if you just can't stop shooting dope, you got to find a Suboxone or methadone clinic. Because yes, the naysayers will be like, oh, your teeth will fall out, or oh, this, friends, your teeth are falling out because you live on the fucking street, you do drugs all the time, you don't brush your teeth, and you've done it for years and years and years. It doesn't have to do with the fucking the old wives' tale of how, you know, methadone is gonna rot your teeth. There's all these guys, oh yeah, look at it, bro. Let's look at it logically. Have you been taking care of your teeth for the past 25, 30 years? No. But there's the answer for you, folks. Like, come on, get the fuck out of here. Let's start with the truth. Many of the drugs we fear today, you know, became a crisis because they were legal first, right? Doctors prescribed oxycodone, hydrocodone, morphine, fentanyl patches, right? Medications with chemical structures operating on the same opioid receptors as heroin. And people trusted them, of course, because they came in orange bottles with child-safe caps and pharmacy labels. Between the late 1990s and mid-2010s, pharmaceutical companies told doctors these medications were non-addictive if used correctly. I'm going to pause right here, my friends. Fuck whoever said that, and fuck the people who approved that shit to be going out national, right? And fuck the doctors and fuck the pharmaceutical companies that were like, yeah, this is a cool thing for us to do. And look at the damage that it has done, it continues to do, and will do into the future if we do not get a fucking rap on this thing, right? And here, of course, is where the stats become part of the story. Because in these types of things, you cannot just tell people stuff. You have to show them and explain to them the numbers. Over just the span of a decade, right, opioid prescriptions in the U.S. quadrupled. That's times 4, friends. And communities saw the consequences immediately, right? Immediately. Rising dependence, rising overdoses, rising hospitalizations. Doctors unknowingly built the bridge people eventually crossed into heroin, folks. And then around 2012, 2013, right, when lawmakers finally realized how bad the crisis was, they slammed them brakes, cutting off tens of thousands of patients almost overnight, right? Imagine this. Nearly 10 million Americans receiving long-term opioid prescriptions at the height of the crisis. 10 million Americans, right? And suddenly, we're stopping your medication today. No tapering, no safety plan, no emotional support. And when the body has cross tolerance, you know, when it's adapted to certain opioid strength, the withdrawal, it becomes unbearable, my friends. People who have never touched heroin in their lives suddenly turn to it because it was cheaper. It was stronger. And friends, it was available. This was not a bad choice, right? This was, oh, you know, if that person just would have made a better choice that day, get the fuck out of here. It's biochemical survival, and exposes this lie we've all absorbed, that legal equals safe. Blah. That illegal equals dangerous. Blah. It works both ways, you know? So sometimes the government says, hey, this is dangerous, but in reality, it's not. And then in some cases, it says, hey, it's legal, it's safe, but in realities, it's not. So, come on, let's be a little more discerning about the shit that we fucking put in our bodies. But the brain, it does not know the difference between a pharmacy opioid or a street one. It only knows the dose, the receptor, and relief. Yes, friends, so let's talk about stimulants. Because the hypocrisy, well, it runs just about as deep there. The government spent decades telling kids that methamphetamines would rot their teeth, ruin their lives, melt their brains. Meanwhile, pediatricians were handing out amphetamine salts to millions of children under the label of ADHD treatment. And listen, friends, as a individual with ADHD, in case you couldn't tell, right, I was prescribed some of this medication for a little bit. Now, of course, I wasn't that good at taking it because I can't remember I want to take it, right? And as a kid, you're not very good at, you don't want to take medications anyway, especially the ones, it did not make me feel good, but it zoned me the fuck out, and it made me quiet, right? It made me easier to handle in class because I was fucking like making noises and shit all day, right? So, and that's not on my parents because they just do what doctors say. They did their best. They took me to therapy. They tried their hardest. They fucking kept trying their hardest. They've paid for rehab out of their own pockets when the insurance wouldn't, go. And that's a blessing that I'm happy that I could have. And I know that lots of people don't have that fucking blessing, which is why I do my best and try not to waste this blessing of sobriety that I have, right? So, either way, when you look at the numbers, right, the pattern of this type of issue becomes clear. Over the last 15 years, prescriptions for ADHD stimulants have risen by more than 250%, particularly among teenagers and young adults. So that means we've normalized the daily use of a stimulant drug so strong that outside of a pharmacy label, possession would land you in prison, right? And this message is twisted, friends. If it comes from a doctor, it's medicine. But if it comes from the street, it's dangerous, and it's poison. Nah. But if two substances have chemical congruence, yes, that key word I mentioned earlier, right? That's why we say them, so we can talk about it later. If they create the same dopamine spikes, right? The same neurological adaptions, remember those words, right? Then the difference isn't morality, right? The difference is control. Yes. And the difference creates a very, very dark irony. Of those who develop dependence on prescription stimulants, a significant portion report their addiction began with following the prescription label, right? Following the rules, not breaking them. They took the pill as instructed. They were given a pill, and they took it, and that, my friends, started their addiction. I mean, it didn't start that one time that they took it, but when they took it, then they kept taking it, obviously, right? Because their parents would force them to take it, or the school would force them to take it, or a combination of the two, right? And, and of course, when dependence sets in, think about the emotional toll that takes on a teenager, right? I don't think a kid would really understand it, but, teenagers, young adults, people who are just now getting into the ideas of, figuring out the world for themselves. I mean, think of all the fucking shit that you already are going through at that age with, developing, physically you're going through stuff. Emotionally you're going through stuff. There's relationships, and you're at school a lot of times. A lot of people are going to college, so the stress of that, or the stress of after high school. Like, what the fuck happens after high school? I'm not even just saying college, because, look, I have, like, a stupid amount of college credits, but they're all towards different things because I've changed my degree so many times, so I'm just yeah, either way, that's I don't want to get off on an emotional tangent about me and my friends, but this hypocrisy of what we're talking about between the medical and the non-medical world, it leaves emotional damage, right? It creates confusion about responsibility. It creates resentment toward institutions that are supposed to protect us, right? And when it leaves people feeling like their addiction is somehow less valid, right? Or less deserving of compassion because it didn't start with the needle. And that, my friends, is something that people feel. They feel like they don't deserve that rehab help. They don't deserve that NA help, that AA help, that any of the A helps. They don't think that, oh, well, my addiction didn't come from shooting heroin, so it's not as bad. Or it's not worth the effort to save, right? It's not worth the effort to try to save them, right? But a lot of times these people, they don't even understand that their addiction started with a prescription. And, we blame the wrong people, right? We make villains out of people that are not villains. And then we make heroes out of people that actually are villains. We ignored chemistry, of course. We ignore pain. We ignore simple truths. Drug addiction does not begin with a substance. I've said it once. I'll say it again. I'll say it a million times probably. It begins with a moment of relief when a person has not been taught how to give themselves relief on their own by either talking about it or dealing with it in some other healthy coping manner. Right? So, what did we learn here in segment 2? Well, we learned that the legal-illegal distinction in a social is a social convention, right? And it's a social invention. It's a social convention and an invention. It's a combination of the two, and that's all it is. It's not a scientific one, right? We learned that the same system that condemned street users, well, it created pharmaceutical demand, right? We learned that addiction does not discriminate, right? So think about, but now here's the big twisterooski, is these medications are still being prescribed, right? And we learned that addiction doesn't discriminate at all. And they're being prescribed to people across the board. Teachers, veterans, athletes, parents, students, and the like. We've learned that opioid and stimulant crisis did not happen in the shadows. These crises did not form by dope fiends buying heroin secretly by the dumpster in an alley behind buildings in big cities, right? No, that's not the case. This shit happened from people getting prescribed this shit by their doctors. And what does that mean? It means people with health care. What does that mean? It means people, a lot of times, if you have health care, you have a job, right? Or you're a family member of someone that has a job, right? So let's do a little bit of, just use our brain here, folks. It's called critical thinking. It happened in broad daylight, under fluorescent lights, in fucking doctor's offices, right? Clinics and pharmacies built to help people. Yeah. And we learned that people who followed every rule, every single rule they followed their prescription bottle to the T. But they still developed dependence. They still developed shame. They still felt abandoned. And there's one more level to this, folks. The deepest level. And that is beneath the chemistry, beneath the policy, beneath the hypocrisy even. And that, my friends, is the emotional root, the part of the story that nobody explains to us, the part that finally makes everything make sense. So if the first two segments showed us how we got here, the next one, my friend, is going to show us how we get out. Because we don't just bitch about things here at Devil Dog Addiction. We come up with ideas and solutions to do something about them. And when? Tomorrow? Oh, nay. Today. Yes. So, segment 3. The root. Feelings, trauma, and the way out, my friends. So, hope you got a few more minutes as we're going to get into it. Try to get through it quick, not get off on too many side tangents. All right, we talked about the misinformation, right, that shaped us. We talked about the hypocrisy that wounded us, right? We're going to step into the part that really matters on this, which is the root, right? Because every addiction, that's right, YouTube over there, no matter how it started, and no matter what the drug was, it grows from the same soil, my friends. Feelings we didn't know how to handle. Pain we didn't know how to name. Memories we didn't know how to survive, right? And emotional education we have never received. And very, 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 very bad examples of adults to imitate. So this is the segment where we get honest about the heart. This is where we talk about the feelings problem, right? The trauma problem, the loneliness problem, the part nobody taught us in school and health class, and even rehab half the times, isn't that right? Today we pull the thread all the way down to the core, deep down inside. But we're going to start with a reading. NA, just for today. Ready for it? Feelings are not facts. Woo, that's a hard one, folks, and it's a difficult one to understand. But is it NA truth? It's a foundational truth of NA, and it's a foundational truth of reality, right? What you feel is not a fact, okay? A foundational NA truth reminding us that emotions can overwhelm us, they can lie to us, they can trick us. But friends, they cannot define us. They need to be felt, not obeyed. What you feel is real, friends, but it's not always true. For many of us, drugs became a replacement for emotional literacy. They became something that we used so we didn't have to feel, right? They're something that we used so we didn't have to feel bad about not knowing that we didn't know how to process what we were feeling, right? Say that one 3 times fast. Cocaine wasn't about confidence, right? It was about escape, right? Fentanyl, not about euphoria. It's about silence. Silencing the fucking... silencing the crazy person that lives inside my brain. Pills, they're not about pain management. They're about numbing the hurt. Where your heart's supposed to be, long before your body actually does, right? If feelings are not facts, friends, then we must learn how to separate the emotional storm from the survival behavior that the storm has created. This is not where fake recovery begins, friends. This is where the real deal starts. Not with willpower, not with shame, not with punishment, but with understanding. And not being like, oh, hey man, I understand you. But actually understanding what you're going through and being able to talk about it. So, here we go with our 3 key terms of this segment. Emotional dysregulation, the inability to manage intense emotions in real time. Some of us can't process emotions in real time. Some of us, it takes a little bit. You got to get out of a situation before you can actually deal with what's going on. Some of us are really good at processing emotions very, very quick. And some of us, and then we can't explain what we've done, or we can't explain how we've got there, right? Number 2, attachment injury. That's damage that occurs when early caregivers fail to provide safety, consistency, or comfort. So we talk about attachment, right? So we're talking about like little babes, right? Little kiddarooskies. Oops, sorry, I just had to make that thing go away. Okay. Attachment injury, right? So you gotta give love to the kids. Give attention to the kids. They don't need money. I mean, they do need, like, they need to be taken care of with, like, clothes and, like, shelter and shit like that. But they don't need bunches of loot, right? They need you. They need your presence. They need your time. They need your input. They need your encouragement. They need your direction and guidance and discipline. Somatic imprint. Ready for it? How trauma stores itself in the body, shaping reactions long after an event has passed. These 3 things, my friends, these are the forces that shape our emotional environment where our addiction can take root. So your somatic imprint, it keeps this trauma inside you, right? So it's there, whether you want it to be there or not. You don't have to let it define who you are, but you do have to take responsibility for what you can do about it. And at least we know one thing we can do about it. Well, 2 things, actually. The first one is we can name that shit. And the second thing is we can talk to somebody about it. So let's start with something nobody told us growing up, folks. Kids who never learn how to process emotions often become adults who self-medicate. Not because they're weak, not because their nervous system is damaged, right? But because it never learned the basics. It never learned the 1, 2, 3s. They never learned the ABCs of basic feeling survival. Look, how to calm down, how to express yourself, how to use your, in my case, how to use my big boy words, right? How to ask for help, and how to withstand discomfort long enough to not have a fucking panic attack. Because I don't know about you, but there's lots of times that I'm about to have a panic attack, and it's because I'm in so much discomfort, And the key is to not get in that panicky state where it overtakes your whole body and you start like sweating and shaking and overheating and feeling like you can't breathe. Yeah, it's no fun. Most of us didn't have these skills, right? We had chaos, we had yelling, we had silence, we had confusion, and we had pressure. We had expectations we didn't know how to meet, right? And here's the heavy truth, folks. About 75% of addiction treatment report significant unresolved childhood trauma. I mean, that's not a very difficult statistic to misunderstand. It's not a very, a lot of us could have probably just predicted that off the top of our heads, right? But not just physical or sexual trauma, okay? And that's where we got to get more into it, right? Emotional neglect, abandonment, feelings of abandonment, unpredictable parenting, friends, unstable homes, or environments where feelings, and this is a big one, were punished instead of understood. So the first time we used, of course, whatever the drug was, it wasn't about getting high. It wasn't about having a fun time. It wasn't about oh, hey, this will be cool, or oh, this will be interesting. It was about, whoa, I heard that this gives a little bit of relief. This can get me a little bit happy. This can make me a little bit less anxious, right? It's about finally exhaling, about turning down a volume in our mind and in our chest that we didn't know how to do. And that emotional relief, right, that becomes that somatic imprint that we're talking about. The body remembers the calm more than the high. It remembers that the scary, bad feelings is no longer there while I'm using this substance, right? And not because trauma makes us reckless, but because trauma makes us unprepared for the life ahead of us. Look, it's not like we weren't taught how to feel. We were taught how to endure, right? We were taught how to just survive. So we use drugs to survive these feelings that we basically couldn't endure ourselves. So let's talk about why recovery feels so damn hard. Not because we're broken, but because we enter recovery emotionally underdeveloped, right? So we're talking about, okay, well, let's first step A, B, and C, admit that there's a problem, right? And then talk about a higher power. And we say, oh, well, that's simple, that's easy. Oh, that should be easy as 1, 2, 3. But friends, that's not the case. A lot of us aren't even to that basic place to even understand what message they're trying to give us. And everybody fucking there has a million different ideas for you. And everyone's like, oh, you should do this. And then they all want to shake your hand. And they all want to know your name. They all want to know, like, what's going on with you. And they all want to be all up in your fucking business. And sometimes you just don't want that when you're trying to deal with sobriety. So, I'm telling you this, friends. If you do feel that way, it's perfectly okay to tell people that you don't want to talk. It's no big deal. No one's going to be like, oh, you're a piece of shit, or oh, you're an asshole, go away. Just tell them you're not in a place that you can talk right now and politely decline their conversation. It's no big deal, my friends. No big deal at all. So, go to meetings, call your sponsor, get a job, right? Fix your finances, heal your relationships, fix your routines, right? Build coping skills all at once? Ha! No way, my friends. Overwhelmed people cannot climb mountains. Overwhelmed people shut down. And here's the numbers paint this picture, folks. Nearly 60% of people leaving inpatient treatment relapse within the first 90 days. Not because they don't care, not because they're weak, but because the emotional demands of the outside world hit faster, they hit harder, they hit quicker, they hit bigger than you thought, and your expectations for the world coming at you were not correct, and your expectations for what you could give the world back were surely not correct. I tell you, recovery asks you to learn a new language, friends. The language of your own heart. In real time, though, because life is going to keep happening. So the key is to find that balance between living your life, growing into your new life, fixing the life, your old life, well, fixing the shit that you did in your old life, right? And there's a whole bunch of things that you got to do at the same time. So you just got to slow it down. And you got to break it into small pieces. But let's go a little deeper than that, because we got to unlearn the belief that needing help makes us failures, or that needing help is difficult to ask for, or needing help is just something that we don't do. People who build community-based support systems are twice as likely to maintain long-term sobriety. So there are the places that you can start these relationships and communities at: AA, NA, churches. Those are just three off the top of my head, right? You can start building relationships there. Start learning about addiction. Start learning about getting clean. Start learning about why these bad things are happening in your life when you use drugs. Learn about why your relationships are not as good as they used to be now that you're doing too many drugs or alcohol, right? But they don't not maintain long-term sobriety because they didn't not want to do it, right? But the statistics flip it around, and you're twice as more likely to maintain long-term sobriety because community is what fixes addiction, friends. And connection regulates our nervous system in the ways that drugs used to, right? So recovery reconnects us because connection is the healing part. And you reconnect and you are balanced, and then you feel a lot better, right? But here's the real root. This is the part that the school never taught, right? This is the part that health class conveniently skipped. And this is the part that rehab oftentimes forgets. That drugs, my friends, they were not the beginning of your addiction. They were the response. So, what have we uncovered in this final segment? Well, we learned, of course, that addiction begins far before the first pill, the first hit, the first line, the first needle, right? It begins in the nervous system, right? It begins in childhood. It begins back in the day. It begins in loneliness. It begins in, inside people who never learned how to regulate their emotions because nobody regulated theirs, right? They weren't taught how to regulate their emotions, right? So how can they do it? Because people aren't just going to know how to do this stuff. So now that we've seen this full picture, of course, misinformation, hypocrisy, and trauma, dysregulation, we get something powerful, which is the purpose of this episode: clarity. And of course, with clarity, wait for it, becomes choice. Once you understand all aspects of a situation, then you can make a knowledgeable choice about what you're going to do. And you don't feel strong-armed into one thing or the other, and you definitely won't be dependent on a drug, so your drug won't make the decision for you. Not the clarity, of course, the beautiful clarity that the old drugs are bad, fear-based choice about drugs, but an informed choice, a compassionate choice, a choice built on truth rather than shame. So it's oh, well, I don't think I'm going to do this drug because of the way that it will affect my long-term growth of my brain, right? And then, hey, if I want to do drugs, I'll choose to do them, when I turn 25 or some shit like that. And yeah, I mean, that's not going to be very popular right off the bat. Of course, that's probably laughable, that idea, for anybody that's a drug addict. But that doesn't mean it's not a good place to start, because an idea, it has to grow, and it's got to start somewhere, right, folks? And if everybody thinks that, oh, well, this could never happen or that could never happen, then, well, we never really get anywhere, right? So this episode, of course, wasn't about blaming the past. A lot of people say, oh, we need to blame our parents. We need to blame our teachers. We need to blame the society. We need to blame. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding what's happened. It's about understanding what is going on, right? It's about understanding what went on, right? So we can finally move the fuck forward, right? Because that's the whole point, is to learn about this stuff, get better at it, fix the problems, do a little revamp, and move forward. Because change is inevitable. It's the only thing you can really count on, right? The only thing that's never going to change is that change is always going to be a fucking thing, right? So we know that healing does not begin with punishment. It begins with permission, my friends. Permission to feel, to learn, to grow, to rebuild. It begins someone that your younger self didn't even know was possible, right? So here's 5 things that we can do today, because we always end the episode with something that we can actually do. Because, oh, and when? Yes, not tomorrow, but today. How about this one? Name one emotion that you're feeling right now, or a little bit later, sometime today, right? Because if you can name what you're feeling, you can work with it, right? How about this? Try this one instead. Drink some water and breathe slowly for 60 seconds. If you're feeling too anxious, if you're feeling really down, if you're feeling anything that's negative, try this idea. Because regulating the body gives your mind a chance to think about how you're actually feeling. And then, hey, if you can name it, then you can work with it, right? How about this? Send one honest text to somebody that you know is safe. And let them know, say, hey, thanks for being a safe person in my life. I promise you, it will help. Try this. Clean one small thing in wherever you stay. Whatever your space is, right? Try to clean one thing, right? Try that one. I know a lot of us addicts, we don't really take care of the places where we live, right? So practicing to keep a nice clean space, but just being like, oh, I'm going to clean today or do this or fix everything all in one day, a lot of times that doesn't work. And then you'll feel really depressed and feel really bad when you don't succeed. So let's try to keep it small, but keep it on task, right? Not the whole house, just a teeny tiny little task. Build that momentum gently. Or try this. Ask yourself, what do I need right now? Most addicts, stupid fly is back, never learn to ask this question. So ask it today, my friends, and answer it today. Well, we've gotten to the end of the show, friends, because today we definitely uncovered the truth beneath addiction. Tomorrow, hope you can join me. It's time to learn how to build this emotional life that we were never taught how to build. One skill, one step, one sunrise at a time. Hope you guys had a great time. Hope you had at least got something knowledgeable out of this talk. If no one told you today, I care about you, and I hope that you have a great, great, blessed day. Peace out.